Have you ever wondered why the same kinds of toxic people keep showing up in your life even after you've blocked them, unfriended them, walked away from them? Some people don't need to say a word to stop the chaos. They simply stop feeding it. They withdraw their energy, and everything begins to fall apart on its own. So imagine if you did the same. What would shift if, for once, you became truly unavailable to dysfunction, not out of anger, but out of clarity? That is the moment everything changes, not because you forced it, but because you stopped resonating with what was never yours to hold. They didn't randomly show up. They were answering a signal you didn't know you were sending. It's a difficult truth to sit with. The toxic people don't just appear. They orbit around something they feel. An energetic openness, a psychological invitation, a gap in your boundaries that whispers, "I'll hold space for your chaos, even if it costs me my peace." You didn't mean to broadcast that frequency. No one ever does. But when you've grown up over-explaining yourself, when you've learned to regulate other people's moods just to feel safe, when your nervous system is trained to chase calm by controlling the storm, then your very presence becomes like a lighthouse for dysfunction. Not because you're weak, but because your body still believes it must absorb the world to survive it. Pause here. Let that land. You're not attracting them because you want pain. You're attracting them because your system is still running on old code. It says, if I can just make them understand, if I can fix this, if I can stay kind enough, calm enough, accommodating enough, then maybe this time I won't get hurt. But here's the paradox. The more open your energy is to being needed, validated, or seen, the more available you become to those who feed on that openness without offering safety in return. And they feel it, not logically, but instinctively, emotionally, biologically. They don't come for your boundaries, they come for your response. The moment you flinch, the moment you explain, the moment you feel the need to prove your worth, they hook into the frequency you never realized you were emitting. But here's the good news. The very moment you become aware of it, you start to reclaim it, because clarity is the death of chaos. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And when you stop broadcasting the energetic signal of "I will rescue you, I will tolerate this, I will trade my stability for your attention," they lose access. Entire relationships begin to dissolve, not because you said anything, but because the invitation is gone. You don't repel toxicity by fighting it. You neutralize it by closing the channel through which it once reached you. So if you've been asking yourself, why does this keep happening to me? Maybe it's time to ask, what part of me still feels responsible for chaos that isn't mine? Because that question shifts the lens from blame to awareness, from defense to sovereignty. You are not the chaos. You are the one who has the power to tune out of it. And when you do, when your presence no longer offers the emotional food certain people rely on, you'll notice something wild. They disappear. They find someone else to project onto, to control, to extract from, because your channel no longer plays the role they need. They don't say goodbye. They just stop needing what you no longer supply. And that is your liberation. So now the question becomes, how do you stop broadcasting dysfunction's favorite frequency? That's what we'll uncover next. It's never just the chaos out there, it's the loop in here. Chaos, once inside your nervous system, starts to feel like home. Not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. It mimics old patterns, the raised voice you tried to soothe as a child, the unpredictable silence you tried to decode, the chronic instability you once thought was love. So when emotional chaos knocks, part of you doesn't flinch. Part of you responds automatically, unconsciously, because somewhere deep inside, you've learned that the quickest way to feel safe is to fix it, absorb it, or silence it. But here's the twist. Chaos doesn't ask to be fixed. It asks to be fed. It thrives on your attention, your explanations, your defenses, your spiraling inner monologue that replays what you should have said, could have done, or might have changed. And with every ounce of that energy, you're unknowingly keeping the loop alive. The loop says, react. The loop says, prove your point. The loop says, don't walk away. They'll misunderstand you. The loop says, maybe this time, they'll finally see your heart. But the loop lies because emotional chaos doesn't seek understanding, it seeks control. And your energy, the moment you engage, is the fuel it needs to continue. Pause. Can you feel the places in your life where the loop is still active? That one person who always leaves you questioning your worth after every interaction. That situation that replays in your head at 2 a.m. even though you thought you were done with it. That invisible pull to clarify, to justify, to fix again and again. This is the cost of staying in the loop. And the loop has no exit until you stop feeding it. So how do you stop? Not by slamming a door or screaming, "I'm done." That's still participation. That's still energy. No, the exit is quieter, stranger, more internal. You stop feeding the loop by removing its food source, your emotional reactivity. The next time someone tries to pull you back into a cycle of dysfunction, watch your breath. Don't react. Don't fix. Don't explain. Instead, observe. Feel the old urgency rise in your chest, the part of you that wants to jump in. Resolve it. Be understood. And then, do nothing. Let it burn. Because in that fire, something dies. The old version of you that needed to be heard, needed to be good, needed to rescue, needed to stay in the loop just to feel visible. That version is dissolving now. You're not punishing them. You're not ghosting. You're simply unavailable. And when the loop doesn't get fed, it collapses. Not instantly, but inevitably. Here's the paradox. You're not ignoring them, you're choosing you. You're not abandoning anyone, you're returning to yourself. And from this place, this calm, clear, unbothered space, you'll begin to understand what real power feels like. Not power over others, but power over your focus, your attention, your nervous system, your peace. So next time chaos knocks, ask yourself, does this need to be resolved? Or does it just need to not be fed? The difference is everything. You've said it all. More than once, you've tried the calm version, the emotional version, the perfectly worded, paragraph length, heart on your sleeve version. Still, they didn't get it. Or worse, they weaponized it. So why do you keep explaining? Because deep down, part of you still hopes that if they finally understand you, they'll value you. It's not about logic. It's about longing. When you over-explain, what you're really doing is saying, please don't leave. Please don't misunderstand me. Please let me be enough for you to care. And that ache, that desperate hope is not about them. It's about the wounded part of you that never felt safe unless your truth was received perfectly. It's the little version of you who believed love could be earned if you just said it right at the right time, in the right tone. But here's the hard truth. People who want to misunderstand you will. People who feed on chaos thrive on your explanations. And people who lack empathy don't need more information, they need distance. Every time you explain yourself to someone committed to misreading you, you abandon a deeper truth. You don't owe anyone an emotional dissertation to justify your boundaries. You owe yourself peace. And still explaining feels so justified, doesn't it? Because you're not yelling, you're not blaming. You're just trying to be understood. That sounds fair. That sounds mature. That sounds emotionally intelligent. But sometimes, explaining is just self-abandonment dressed up in politeness. Because here's what rarely gets said. The need to explain usually isn't about them understanding. It's about you being okay with their reaction. And if you've lived a life where being misunderstood led to punishment, withdrawal, or abandonment, then over-explaining becomes your way of staying safe. But you're not that child anymore. You don't have to explain your no. You don't have to justify your silence. You don't have to convince anyone that your boundary is valid, because people who truly value you don't need perfect phrasing to respect your space. They don't need a monologue to honor your energy. They just feel the alignment. They get it. And those who don't, they're not your people. Not now. Not at this version of you. So let this be the quiet revolution. Let the next time you feel the urge to explain be the moment you pause instead. Let the silence speak where your words used to plead. Let the unspoken boundary echo louder than 1,000 justifications. And notice what happens. You'll feel it first as discomfort, a tension in your chest, an urge to defend, an ache to be seen. Breathe through it. That's the old self dissolving. Then you'll feel something else, clarity. Not coldness, not distance, just peace. The kind of peace that says, I no longer explain my worth. I embody it. Because the truth is, the more you explain, the less they hear. But the moment you stop needing them to get it, you begin to get yourself. So next time you find yourself drafting another message, rehearsing another line, trying to make them understand, ask yourself this: do I want to be heard? Or do I want to be free? Choose freedom. You've told yourself it's over. You've cut the cord, blocked the number, walked away with resolve. But then, why does their name still make your heart race? Why does a memory still hijack your breath when you least expect it? Because healing isn't just a mental decision, it's a biological one. Your body remembers what your mind has tried to forget. Long after you've logically processed the situation, your nervous system can still be trapped in the echo of an old bond, especially when that bond was formed in trauma. This is what makes toxic patterns so sticky. They weren't just unhealthy, they were intense. They flooded you with adrenaline, with highs and crashes, with constant unpredictability masked as connection. And in that chaos, your brain formed powerful associations because pain mixed with longing creates the most addictive emotional cocktail. This is not weakness. This is chemistry. The brain doesn't prioritize what's good for you. It prioritizes what's familiar. And if you grew up around emotional inconsistency, love that came and went, affection with conditions, safety that depended on your performance, then chaos isn't just familiar. It feels like home. That's how trauma bonds form. You attach not because it's safe, but because it feels recognizable. You confuse intensity with intimacy. You mistake emotional survival for real connection. Even when your mind knows better, your body still waits for the next hit, the next message, the next apology, the next argument that gives you just enough of a spark to keep the loop going. And if you're not careful, you'll call that spark chemistry. But what if it's just cortisol? What if what you're craving isn't love? It's nervous system regulation through conflict, the only form of connection your body was wired to expect. Here's where everything starts to shift. When you realize that your body isn't betraying you, it's protecting you in the only way it knows how. The racing heart, the shallow breath, the gut tension, these aren't flaws. They're clues, messages, data. Your body is not keeping you stuck. It's asking you to pay attention. So pause. The next time that familiar pull tugs at you, the one that says maybe just one more conversation, maybe they've changed. Maybe I was too harsh, don't shame it. Observe it. Say to yourself, this is a memory, not a message. Let the sensation rise and pass. Because when you stop reacting and start regulating, you change the pattern, not just emotionally, but neurologically. And that's the turning point. Healing becomes possible not when you convince yourself to move on, but when your body stops expecting chaos as the baseline. You'll notice it in subtle ways. You no longer crave the high of dramatic connection. You get bored with games. Silence doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like peace. And most of all, you stop chasing relationships that need you to abandon yourself just to feel temporarily alive. So ask yourself, not from your mind, but from your nervous system, what does safety feel like now? Who do you become when your body no longer has to fight to be loved? The answer may feel unfamiliar at first. That's okay. Peace always feels strange when all you've ever known is tension. But this is your reintroduction to calm, to steadiness, to wholeness. And from this space, you no longer attract what once broke you. You outgrow it body first. They don't need your love. They need your reaction. That's the part no one tells you. Toxic dynamics aren't maintained by conversation. They're maintained by your response. Every time you defend, explain, escalate, or even plead, you're giving them exactly what they need to stay in control. Your energy, because energy, not logic, is the true currency in these dynamics. And what happens when you stop spending it? Everything starts to crumble. See, some people don't want resolution. They want resonance. They want your nervous system tuned to their chaos. They want to know that they can still reach into your world and move things around, not to reconnect, but to reclaim dominance. And that's why stillness terrifies them, not silence laced with passive aggression, not retreat as manipulation. I'm talking about stillness as power, where you no longer leak energy into the chaos they create. You no longer respond out of fear, guilt, or the urge to be seen as good. You simply don't move, and suddenly their power dissolves. Because if they can't provoke you, they can't control you. If they can't pull a reaction from you, they can't feed off your emotional fuel. If your presence no longer bends to accommodate their drama, they're left alone with the noise they tried to project onto you. That's the moment everything shifts. You see, stillness is not inaction, it's mastery. It's the deep, grounded breath you take before reacting. It's the pause that says, I don't owe this energy my peace. It's the unshakable clarity that understands not everything deserves your reply. In this stillness, your identity starts to evolve. You are no longer the fixer, no longer the explainer, no longer the emotional first responder to someone else's chaos. You become untouchable. Not because you're cold, but because you're clear. Not because you're avoiding, but because you're embodied. And here's what they'll do when your stillness holds. They'll escalate because the old playbook isn't working. They'll guilt trip because silence makes them face themselves. They'll call you distant, cold, selfish because they can't feel the power they used to siphon from you. Let them. Your job is not to convince them that your peace is valid. Your job is to protect that peace. Even if your hands are shaking, even if your chest tightens, even if every part of you wants to jump in and prove something, stillness. That's where the alchemy happens, because stillness is the space where you hear you again, where the nervous system softens, where your intuition returns, where your power roots back into the earth of your being. It is in stillness, not reaction, where sovereignty is reclaimed. And ironically, when you stop reacting, they no longer see you as a player in their game. You fade from the stage. You become unreadable, unreachable, unavailable, not by blocking, not by punishing, by becoming neutral. And neutrality is the highest form of spiritual boundary. Because in that still space, you stop feeding the illusion that their chaos requires your participation. You stop dancing to a song that was never yours to begin with. So next time the bait comes through blame, guilt, chaos, or silence, don't bite. Breathe, be still, and watch the whole game collapse around your stillness. What if the real you isn't someone you've become, but someone who's been buried under years of performance? Think about it. Who are you when you're not trying to be right? Not trying to be liked? Not trying to be safe through compliance? Kindness, logic, or emotional labor? What remains when the need to prove disappears? Most of us don't know because we've never stopped performing long enough to find out. We've lived entire lives in reaction, proving we're not too much, proving we're not cold, proving we're worthy of being kept, of being chosen, of being believed. And every performance, no matter how polished, creates one quiet consequence: self-abandonment. Each time you shapeshift to avoid rejection, you step further away from your essence. Each time you explain to someone unwilling to understand, you trade truth for approval. Each time you absorb their chaos to make peace, you lose the peace within. And the pattern becomes this. You start mistaking being good for being real. You start chasing validation as proof of your existence. You start thinking, if they finally approve, then I can rest. But here's the breakthrough. Rest doesn't come from approval. It comes from enoughness, from realizing that nothing you say or do will ever be enough for the wrong person, and that has nothing to do with your worth. So what happens when you drop the script? There's a moment of fear, of disorientation, because identity built around performance collapses when the performance ends. But after the collapse comes something else: stillness, simplicity, self. You begin to notice you laugh more easily, you breathe more deeply, you move through the world not as someone waiting for permission, but as someone who already belongs. You speak slower not because you're afraid, but because you're no longer rushing to prove. You listen more not to defend, but because you're curious again. And most of all, you feel lighter, because you're no longer carrying the weight of perception. That's what it means to be unbotherable. It's not armor, it's alignment. It's not ego, it's essence. You become the kind of person who doesn't chase closure because your peace doesn't depend on someone else's clarity. You become the kind of person who doesn't need the last word because your presence is the final statement. And the people who once drained you, they'll call you different, distant, changed. Let them. Their discomfort with your wholeness is not your burden to carry. Your job is not to stay small so others can feel big. Your job is not to dim your clarity so others don't squint. Your job is to stop explaining and start embodying, because when you're no longer trying to prove anything, something wild happens. You start belonging to yourself again. You remember who you were before the world convinced you to perform. And in that remembering, you return, not to the past, but to the real, the version of you that doesn't need to be understood to feel at peace, the version of you that can hold silence without shrinking, the version of you that knows freedom is the absence of proving. So let them wonder. You don't owe anyone a performance. They never appreciated in the first place. You owe yourself your presence. There's no applause when it happens. No spotlight, no triumphant soundtrack. Just silence, spacious, unfamiliar, liberating silence. That's the moment you know the shift has begun. You're not avoiding anyone. You're not ghosting. You're just not resonating anymore. Drama used to follow you like a shadow, not because you were chaotic, but because there was a part of you still open, still broadcasting unfinished wounds, still needing resolution, still leaking just enough energy to magnetize dysfunction. But not now. Now, you walk into rooms and you feel the tension without absorbing it. Now, you hear the bait in someone's voice and let it pass like traffic noise. Now, you spot the manipulation in a compliment and you smile not because you're playing along, but because you see through it, and it no longer hooks you. This is the quiet shift. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not closed off. You're contained. You don't need to declare boundaries anymore. They're felt, unspoken, energetic. People sense it. The ones who used to test you now hesitate. The ones who used to drain you now keep their distance. Not because you warned them, but because they feel the difference. It's not your words that changed. It's your availability. Your energy no longer says, "I'll fix you." It says, "I'm responsible for me." And that changes everything. The chaos stops circling. The drama stops knocking. The narcissist stops charming. Not because the world changed, but because you did. Because the version of you who used to attract them, gone. That version needed something they offered: a distorted mirror of intensity, a dose of attention, a place to pour your love even if it never returned. But you don't need that anymore. You've become rooted, regulated, resonant with peace. And that resonance is what makes you invisible to drama. You no longer light up when dysfunction enters the room. You no longer mistake inconsistency for passion. You no longer try to help those who don't want healing. Instead, you conserve. You protect your stillness like a flame in the wind. You hold your energy like it's sacred because it is. And when life tests you, you respond from the body, not the wound. A deep breath replaces the reflex. A pause replaces the explanation. A gentle no replaces the overworked maybe. This is embodiment. It's no longer a performance of healing. It's the lived reality of someone who is the boundary, who is the peace, who is the shift. And because of that, your very presence now filters who approaches you. You don't chase clarity anymore, it arrives. You don't beg for respect, you embody it. You don't seek love through exhaustion, you receive it in alignment. You don't attract drama because there's no energetic match left to attach to. This isn't a miracle. It's nervous system work, identity work, spiritual pruning, shadow integration, time. It's the cumulative result of every moment you chose to pause instead of react, to feel instead of explain, to walk away instead of prove. And now you're here, not healed, but whole, not invincible, but unavailable to what used to unravel you. So let it be quiet, let it be subtle, let it be real. You are not the same, and from here forward, life will respond to your frequency, not your fear. You will lose the noise you once thought was connection, but in return, you'll find your original signal. When you stop proving your worth to people who refuse to see it, you finally start living like someone who already belongs. This is not the end, it's your rebirth. The soft emergence of a self no longer defined by conflict, but by congruence. So now I ask you, are you ready to be misunderstood in order to finally be real? If the answer is yes, write it in the comments. I choose peace. And stay with me, because in the next piece, we'll explore how to maintain this new frequency even when old patterns come knocking. Your silence is no longer absence, it's presence, and the world will feel it.